Welcome to Sister Talk Real Talk, a show where real women discuss real issues. My name is Monique, and I have the honor and the pleasure of being your host every week. On this show, I provide women with information, insights, and perspectives that I hope will enlighten, challenge, and encourage you to live your best life and to walk in your purpose. Stay tuned, it's going to be a great show.
Days overtaken, and I feel I've overcome. I found my way back.
Hello, and thank you for joining me for this episode of Sister Talk Real Talk. My name is Monique, and I am your host, and I'm excited to talk to you this week. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to Sister Talk Real Talk. I truly hope that the information and insights that I provide are giving you some at least things to think about, if not action items. Today's topic that we're going to talk about is I titled the show Keep It Real. And the reason why I titled it that is that one of the things we do as women is we are dishonest with ourselves. We can be very truthful with everyone else, but we're dishonest with ourselves. You may say, what do you mean by that? We aren't honest with ourselves sometimes about what we actually want, what we want out of life, what we want out of a relationship, what we want from work, what we want from our loved ones. We're often not even honest about what we actually just need. So I've entitled this, Keep It Real. William Shakespeare said, "This above all, to thy own self be true. And it must follow, as the night the day, thou cannot be false to any man." Basically, what that means is, in order for you to really be honest with everyone else around you, you first have to be honest with yourself. And in doing so, you provide yourself some authenticity, real authenticity. Now, in order to be real and to thy own self be true, that means we have to ask ourselves the tough questions. We have to get to a place where we're in a quiet space and time where we can actually say, what is it that I want or that I need? Last week's episode, I talked about how to heal. We've been talking about the healing process. And part of that was being able to identify the things that were going on in your life that were causing you pain. Now I want to take it a next step further. Part of that healing process, or even just a growth process, is from time to time, we need to actually do a check-in. So think about this. On your job, your supervisor does check-ins. With my team members, I do one-on-ones, weekly check-ins. You have quarterly or semi-annual or annual reviews that go, over what your goals were, what you accomplished, where you're succeeding, where you actually need some areas of improvement, or there's opportunity for improvement or growth, where you want to stretch. They're called stretch goals. How often, we can check in with our children. How are you? How was your day? What's going on? We may check in with our spouses or our husbands, our boyfriends, our loved ones. We may check in with our girlfriends. We check in on them. How are you? What's going on with your child that was sick? What's going on with you in your relationship that we talked about? How often do we actually take time and set aside dedicated time to check in with ourselves? When was the last time, I'll put my name here, but you put your name here. When was the last time you did a Monique check-in? When you sat down and said, I'm going to take a half an hour. It doesn't have to be long. Maybe it's 15 minutes. That may be all you have. For women, that are moms, stay-at-home moms, working moms, not moms at all. You're single, you're busy. Everyone has busy lives, a busyness for different reasons. The only time you may have may be time when you're sitting down in the bathroom. We're keeping it real, right? Let's be real. So the only time you may have is when you lock the bathroom door and whatever those outside disturbances or interruptions could be, and you decide to leave your cell phone on the other side of that door. I know it sounds dangerous. You can do it. Leave the cell phone on the other side of that door. And maybe it's you just sitting down while you're in the bathroom and thinking about, where am I? I'm doing a check-in with myself. I have to keep it real. If I want to be honest and to my own self be really true, what is it that I really want? What is it that I really need? So begin to take inventory. If you are unhappy, if you are bored, if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you're not being challenged, you may feel like you're content and everything is great. In every single one of those situations, the question is still appropriate. How can I grow? Keep it real. What is it you've been wanting to do that you haven't done? What is it that you need to do and you've been putting off? But more importantly, for your own emotional, spiritual well being, what do you need? When was the last time someone asked you that? We fulfill everyone else's needs, but when was the last time you asked yourself that and you checked in? I suggest that we take some time. I don't think there's ever been a woman when I've been coaching or talking to them or just talking to a girlfriend where I've posed the question to them. They've talked about everything else that's going on around them, but when I've posed the question to them, what do you need? There's never been a time when there hasn't been a pause and a slight look of being perplexed on their faces, like, wow, I haven't really thought about that. And then the thinking, the pondering starts. And when it really gets to a point where they've kind of settled into that thought process, you know what I see in their eyes? I see this sparkle. I see a twinkle. Or sometimes I see a little bit of sadness because there's a recognition that somewhere along the way, we've forgotten to do a check-in with ourselves. We haven't done our review. We haven't done a one-on-one with ourselves. What that ends up looking like in your life and in our lives is that we become overstressed, we get anxious, we have trouble sleeping, or we sleep too much, or we have challenges with our relationships, or we just are on the go, 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 and we drive ourselves. But ladies, if we can't be true to ourselves about what we need, how is it we can then really be authentic in our other relationships? Whether it's with our husbands, our boyfriends, our children, our female friends, our acquaintances, even in our work life. I'll address work for a moment. How often do we actually sit down and say, what is it that I need? What do I want to do? Sometimes we may feel dissatisfied in our jobs, but have we approached it? Have we been bold? Have we been bold enough to have a conversation about what we want? If it's in a romantic relationship, how many of us women actually settle and are actually unhappy with what we're receiving from the person who loves us? Does the person who loves us even know that we have a need they're not fulfilling? Have we shared that? We have this fear, and part of it is I think just us as women, we are amazing, again, as I said, is taking care of others. But we have this innate thing of trying to make sure that everything and everyone is okay. And sometimes that means we don't like to ruffle feathers. We don't like to kick dust up. We don't like to cause things or to have conversations that may be uncomfortable. What's really interesting about this is I found you may have a woman that is a boss in the boardroom. She is a CEO, she's an executive, she's running teams, companies, Fortune 500 companies, she's doing all of these things. But then she may find herself in a place where she has a female, a girlfriend, just a really good best friend or friends, where that relationship is not going well. But she doesn't say anything because she doesn't want to trouble the water. She may feel like, you know what? The only time I hear from so-and-so is when she calls me, is when she needs something. She needs advice about her kids. She needs me to babysit her kids. She needs something from me. But she doesn't have that conversation. She may ignore the call, may cut the call short, but doesn't pause and say, you know, girlfriend name, it really saddens me that the only time I hear from you is when you need something from me. I would really love it if you called just to check on me and say hello. Now that's an interesting conversation, and it sounds like it's a tough conversation. But let's weigh this out a little bit. And if you don't have that, what happens is that it's a one-sided relationship. One part of the relationship is happy, but you are not. That goes along with love relationships. I had a conversation with a woman a few weeks ago, several weeks ago, and we were talking, and she was at a point in her life where she had to make some decisions. She's like, I really need to make some decisions. And I asked her some pointed questions. And what I said to her was this: we only get one life. There are no do-overs. This is it. What we do today, it's gone. I often say to my friends, it's funny, and I just saw it come on TV not too long ago again. But one of my favorite movies from a long time ago was Back to the Future. There's Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3, but it was a DeLorean. It was a car that they used in order to go back, and then they would use it to come back in time, and they'd use it to come back into the future, from the past. And I look at people, I'm like, you don't have a DeLorean. You're not going to be able to go back in time. You're not going to be able to go back and fix it. So if you look up and you're 70 or 75 years old, or you're 80 years old, or you're 90 years old, will you look back and say, I wish I would have when I was 70, or I wish I would have when I was 50, or I wish I would have when I was 30? The challenge is that at that point in time, there are no do-overs. There are no DeLoreans. We can't go back, and we can't change it. So I want to challenge you to stop and take some inventory with your life. And please, I am not saying, and I'm not proposing that everybody out there and every woman out there is miserable. I'm not saying that. I'm saying challenge yourself. I'm saying you don't even have to be unhappy to challenge yourself. Sometimes everything is great and good and we get comfortable, but are you growing? Do you have some stretch goals? And what I mean by stretch goals are, if you've been working on a job or you have feedback, even when you're volunteering, if you volunteer in organizations, they'll have goals. And sometimes if they're raising money, they'll have a goal of raising, a certain amount of money, let's say $100,000. But their stretch goal is $130,000. So maybe you've reached your goals and you're in a place where you're comfortable. Well, what's your stretch goal? What's that next step? What's that next thing for you to do? Or what have you been wanting to do that you haven't done? I hear people say all the time, I've always wanted to take up dance lessons, but they haven't done it. Or they say, I really wanted to travel to this place. And they have the means to do it, but they haven't done it. Or something that I did a long time ago is when I was younger and my kids were smaller and I was really, really busy, I used to think about people and think, I really want to get this person a card, or I really want to do this for this person. And I would think about it, and then time would pass and it would seem like the opportunity to pass and I wouldn't do it. And I really got tired of it. And finally one day I said, Monique, if you think about it, you say you want to do it, then take the time to go do it. If it's on my heart to do it, and go do it. And I changed that paradigm. Sounds like something simple, but it was amazing, the conversations, and sometimes just at that right time with different people in my life, that I was able to bring something into their life to let them know that they were being thought of and that they were valued. Maybe it's as simple as something that you've been wanting to do that you haven't done. So I've always wanted to insert whatever that is here. And then set yourself a goal saying, by this time next week, by next month, in 3 months, I'm going to, and whatever that thing was you were down in the first, and you filled in the blank, fill that blank in. Now, this is really a high level of let's be real or keep it real. It really is only scratching the surface. But take some time to evaluate, what do I want? And the reality is that as life changes, as we go through different seasons of life, things change. What we want and what we need change. But the thing we want to make sure we always do is to do a check-in with ourselves so that we can be the most authentic, our most authentic selves, not only internally, but with everyone around us. It doesn't mean, and I'm not saying, I don't want people writing in and saying, oh, she said that we're fake. I'm not saying we're fake. I'm saying that sometimes we forget about us. We forget about ourselves. So remember, to thy own self be true. What is your truth? What is it that you want to do? What is it that you need? If you've been afraid or concerned or scared to say what you need, whatever the situation is, be bold enough to speak for yourself, because guess what? No one else is going to. If you don't speak for yourself, who else will? You've got a voice that God has given you. You've got ideas. You've got skills and talents. You have needs. So let them be known. Use your voice and have a conversation about what you need with whomever you need to have that conversation. And it doesn't have to be confrontational. It can be over coffee. It can be over tea. It can be over wine. It can be sitting in the living room having a conversation. It can be laying in bed and pillow talk, whatever it is with whomever you need to have the conversations. It can be at work in a one-on-one with your boss, whomever and wherever you need to have them. You can approach it by starting the sentence with, I've been evaluating some things, and I've identified some things that I would like to change and stretch and grow. I was wondering if you could help me with X. Or, I've identified that these are some things that I actually need. Would you be willing to do X, Y, or Z? It's a conversation, and you can pose it as a question. You can pose it as a statement. But take the time and keep it real. Thank you for listening to Sister Talk Real Talk. I hope that today's show has informed, enlightened, encouraged, or challenged you. We're always on doing this thing called life with you throughout the week. You can catch us on Facebook and on Instagram at Sister Talk Real Talk, and on Twitter at Sister Talk for Real. That's Sister Talk, the number 4, real. Let's continue the conversation throughout the week. You can catch all of our shows on our blog at sistertalkrealtalk.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Until then, keep it real.